Key number one to getting a comfortable win against Maryland is protecting the football and protecting Dillon Gabriel. Sure, that's technically two keys, but they fall into the same vein. So let's start with the first half of that, not turning the football over. This Maryland defense has not been great this season statistically, but the one area where they can get you a little bit is in the turnover department. They have recovered 6 fumbles, and they have picked off opponents 9 times this year. So through 8 games, they're averaging about 2 takeaways per game. They're one of the 25 or 30 best or so in the entire country in that department. That has been how their defense has found success. If you are able to not give them the football or give them opportunities to make plays, they have struggled. There are a lot of young guys on that side of the ball, as Trey Moore of Locked On Terps talked about on yesterday's show. I've heard that elsewhere as well, that they're working in some young guys there. They don't have a lot of high-end talent or guys that they could send to the NFL draft yet, and that they've just struggled in coverage this year. Even without Tez Johnson, this is a really dangerous Oregon receiving corps. I think Evan Stewart could be in for a really big game, but you can't turn the football over. And if you don't, Maryland's defense just hasn't been able to hold up statistically this year. They're giving up almost 28 points per game. Only 105 of those rushing yards are on the ground, but 275 yards that they give up per game are through the air. So if you give Dillon Gabriel time, which is the second part of this particular key to the game, if you keep Dillon Gabriel off of the ground, and Maryland's been okay rushing the passer this year, he's going to pick apart this Maryland defense. And I think when Gabriel has thrown interceptions, which we haven't really seen a lot in the last few games, not since the Michigan State outing several weeks ago. Gosh, that feels like a lifetime ago. It was just a handful of weeks. Time flies when you're having fun. Oregon's 9-0, ranked number 1, so it has indeed been fun to this point. But Gabriel's only thrown 1 interception since then on the unnecessary deep shot taken against Illinois. The game was already well in hand at that point early in the fourth quarter. And in the first half, in that Illinois game, for instance, when Gabriel had a bunch of time to throw, they dropped 8 in coverage, and the offensive line just protected. They didn't hold, and Gabriel just got to sit, pat the ball, look. He found Tez Johnson, catch and run for a long touchdown. Now, Tez, of course, not there this week, but if you keep Dillon Gabriel upright, he showed last week he can still create explosives to Evan Stewart and Trayshawn Holden. He can work in just as slow. But when you don't have your leading receiver in both in all 3 of the categories of receptions, yards, and touchdowns this year, there is an adjustment. And you want to make that adjustment, however small, as easy as possible. And I think last week, Oregon's offensive line did a good job. There were no sacks in that game. I've talked about how Dillon Gabriel was responsible for that as well, with his movement in the pocket and getting away from potential sacks. He should have more time this week. And if he does, first full game without Tez Johnson, allow him to settle in and get used to that, whatever difference that is for him at the quarterback position. I think that's a big key for the Ducks. So those 2 things kind of make up one unified key of keeping it safe. Keep Dillon Gabriel off the ground, keep the ball out of harm's way, and this offense should have no problem going up and down the field. Key number 2, take away Ty Felton. This is a guy who is already approaching a 1,000-yard season, and Maryland has played 8 games so far this year. Oregon's played 9. Maryland's already had both their byes, so they've only played 8, and Felton has got over 900 yards receiving this season. For reference, Tez Johnson is over 600, but I think he's 649 or so with 8 touchdowns. Felton is a guy who can torch you, and I'm really interested to see how much trust they have, because this is different than Ohio State, where you've got 3 receivers that on any given play can just beat a DB, make a catch, make a contested catch, take the top off of defense, whatever you need them to do. Carnell Tate is a really high-level number 3. Abuka is probably the best number 2 receiver in the country, could be a number 1 on a lot of teams, and Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman, is utterly fantastic. So when you have that sort of matchup, it makes sense that you don't have a corner shadow a particular wide receiver. I mean, Brandon Johnson matched up with Jeremiah Smith sometimes. Nico Reed matched up with Smith. Jabbar Muhammad matched up with him. They just played their spots and said, okay, well, we'll just defend whichever receiver comes over to this side. For this Maryland receiving corps, they've got a couple of guys, and with the way they can throw the football, certainly Caden Prather is capable, but he's got just over half of the receiving yardage that Ty Felton has had this year. Felton's got 73 receptions, and Prather's the next closest with 45. So whoever's been playing quarterback, Ty Felton, number 10, that's been the go-to for this Terps offense. So I don't know if they shadow Jabbar Muhammad, or if they have Jabbar Muhammad shadow him rather, or if they say, no, we trust Brandon Johnson if they want to put him in the slot. We trust Nico Reed if he goes to the other side. That'd be my guess, because all those guys have played really well this year. Nico Reed in particular, I think has just had a phenomenal season and would be in the running right now. I'll talk about this during the bye week in 2 weeks' time. Most improved player from a season ago, Nico Reed would have to be near the top of that list, if not at the top of it. There are other candidates to be sure, but he'd be up there for me. I'm interested to see how they play. They probably don't travel a defensive back, but Muhammad's moved around a little bit. He's played in the slot or even over the top at safety at times this year. I think taking away Ty Felton and holding him under 70 yards receiving will make it at least a little bit more challenging for whoever's playing quarterback for the Terrapins here. And then key number 3 is don't allow the big plays. This is a team in Maryland that wants to throw the football, hasn't been spectacular running the ball so far this season. 119 yards per game on the ground, not a great number from an offensive standpoint. It'd be all right if it were defensive, but offensively, that's not great. I don't know that Maryland has played a team that can run the ball as well as Oregon can at times this year. I mean, they went for 175 last week against Michigan on the road. And week by week, the rushing totals that Maryland has allowed: 88 against UConn, 121 against Michigan State, 123 against Virginia, 75 against Villanova, 151 against Indiana, 80 to Northwestern, 81 to USC, and 123 to Minnesota. I think Minnesota is the best rushing team in that particular list. I think you'd put Michigan State maybe in there as well, but this is a different caliber of offensive line, even without Marcus Harper. I feel good about that unit up front. We'll see who replaces him and how well they're able to gel without their starting right guard from the last 7 games now, 7, 6, however many they've officially made the shift for. Time just is all a blur in a social construct at this point. But I think that if Oregon limits the explosive plays and makes Maryland go down the field and be disciplined to go for 5-yard plays or take a few yards here, I don't think they're going up and down the field running the football. They want to go up and down, throwing it all around the yard, and that's a much more difficult thing to do, right? It's reminiscent of the Oregon game against Idaho, where Gabriel completes 41 passes for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns, but everything was kind of dink and dunk. Is this Maryland offense that might go back and forth with quarterbacks disciplined enough? Are they efficient enough to have those sorts of drives and sustain them against this Oregon defense? I doubt it, especially at Autzen Stadium. So I think if you take away explosive plays, make them move down the field with the lack of a running game, I don't think that plays into what Maryland wants to do offensively. So those are the 3 keys to getting an easy win here. And if Oregon goes 0 for 3 on those keys, they can still win the football game because they just have a lot more talent than Maryland. But I think if Oregon cruises and is able to get some second unit guys in by the fourth quarter, as they have other times this year, like against Illinois and Purdue, if they protect the football in Dillon Gabriel, shut down Ty Felton, or at least contain him to well under 100 yards and don't allow big plays, I think Oregon will win this football game. You do 2 of those 3 keys, Oregon will win pretty close to the final score prediction that I've got, which is Ducks 38, Maryland 7.